I actually grew up below poverty level, but never knew it. My dad at one point in time owned his own business when I was a child. My mom worked to pay for insurance for the family. So there were times where the family didn't have money to buy the things that we wanted, and sometimes didn't always have the money to buy things that we needed. I feel like as an adult, there are times that I've really struggled with that in my life. Had my parents talked a little bit more about money and been a little bit more open, I feel like I would have probably been a little bit more financially successful.
Welcome to Everyone's Talking Money, where we get brutally honest about money, mindset, and making life richer. Melissa, you're the second conversation we're having this week about money dysmorphia. Tell me what money dysmorphia is and how it shows up in people.
Okay, well, thank you, first of all, for having me today. When it comes to money dysmorphia, it's basically the way that folks look at their financial situations. A lot of times we have a skewed perspective of money. Sometimes there's an abundance there that we don't realize we actually have. And for others, we think there's more there than what we actually have. So, in other words, another way to say that is a lot of times people might have some money set aside for savings and feel like they never have enough. It's never going to be enough. They're never going to be able to reach their financial goals. And other times we see folks who think that they have more money than they actually do, and they're living and spending well outside their means.
That's interesting that it can go both ways. So never enough or not enough. Math is telling us you do not have enough, which when I think of money dysmorphia, that was not the direction I was going. So tell me a little bit about that, what that looks like for someone that thinks that they have more than they really do.
Okay, so for some examples that I've actually encountered out in the field when I go out and teach financial literacy or financial empowerment classes, I try to steer away from the words financial education because a lot of times people who might not have a background in finance feel like they're maybe a little bit illiterate in that area. And so I never want to come off offensive. So I try to tell them that this is a financial empowerment course and I'm trying to empower them and teach them how to make their money work for them. And so some of the stories that folks share with me are, I'm living well outside my means, but I just don't know how to get ahead. I'm falling behind in my bills. How do I go about, rewriting my credit score? And so for a lot of folks, I really think that they want to dive straight into the credit and debt and how that actually works and how they can improve their finances when they really need to take a step back and start from the beginning, and that's building a strong foundation. And that starts with budgeting, right? You have to know how much money you have coming in and basically where you're spending your money at times to kind of help traject or to put yourself on a path of financial stability. When you know what you have coming in and you know where you're spending your money, you know where you can trim what I like to call the financial fat. A prime example of this, I actually went through this with my parents. My dad, cable, loves TV, right? That's just his state of mind right now as a retiree. He's like, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to watch TV. And I'm like, Dad, why are you spending so much money on cable? And he's like, well, I need to have this channel and I need to have that channel. And I said, can we dial this back a little bit? You cannot watch 600 channels at one time. So are there things that you would rather watch seasonally? Can we pick up a sports package maybe during the NFL season, right? And pay for that during that time rather than pay for that year round. Some of the other things that I've run into are folks who are like, I don't know where my money's going. I get my paycheck on a Friday and come Wednesday the next week, my money's gone. And so really teaching them how to sit down and make a budget so that they realize where they're spending their money. A lot of times we live in this day and age where we want everything here and now, and it's always at the touch of our fingertips. And that immediate gratification or that instantaneous purchase, right? Because places like Amazon make it so easy. I can just select it, stick it in my cart, and it shows up on my door like magic just a few days later. And so I think a lot of times folks are living in this generational, like what they're seeing on social media. This person's got this great life. I have a sister-in-law who was addicted to Amazon, at least at one point in time. And so my brother was like, every time I come home, there's a new package on the porch. Like, what are you doing? And I think it just becomes, for some, habitual, where they have that I have to spend, I have to buy, because it does sometimes make us feel good, right? And so I use a lot of stories when I'm out teaching financial empowerment about things that I've run into. Really share a lot of stories about my family, and they would probably cringe a little bit in some of the things that I actually share with the public. But I honestly feel like when you can relate to someone, then it makes it a little bit easier to understand either where they're coming from, where they've been, where they're headed to, right? And so it allows me to kind of show them red flags that they might not see in themselves if I share that story about my sister-in-law and the Amazon purchases, and then realizing like, hey, where did my money go for the month or for the week? I still have other bills that I have to pay and the money's no longer there. So then what do I do? And so I really encourage folks to start with a budget. It's great that you want to improve a credit score, that you want to pay down debt, that you want to raise your FICO score. I mean, I think that those are all wonderful things for us to, at some point in time, attain. But it really starts with taking a look at where our money is going. Do we need to pick up a second job because we just can't stop that spending habit, right? I like to remind them that your FICO score and how much money you have in the savings account does not really reflect who you truly are, right? That's just a snippet of your financial situation. And how do we go about improving that so that you can actually reach the financial goals you have for yourself?
It's funny you bring up the FICO score, and that comes up a lot when speaking with people. And there is such a focus on having a good credit score.
Yes.
And yes, that's important. It's your credit worthiness. You know, banks and credit unions look at that if they're looking to lend you money. But really, what that is I'm worthy to take on debt. The bank or the institution is saying, yep, you can take on debt. You either make enough money that I'm willing to give you money because math tells us you're going to pay us back. But that's really what that means. So although it's important, there seems to be such a focus on it. And if we redirect our energy and our focus on managing the money in versus money out, that's probably going to be a lot more fruitful to us.
Correct. And when we're looking at those financial snapshots, when we're looking at a budget, we realize that there's usually more money there than what we thought we had. And where there's not more money, we can stop and take a look at those financial fats that we need to trim, such as a cable bill, right? Who needs to spend that much in cable? If TV is your go-to and it's your, I need to decompress a little bit, then that's fine. But is there something on a smaller scale that you can purchase, or specific packages that you can purchase during specific times of the year, to where you can start paying down debt or putting money in a savings account and investing for your financial future, rather than just having it go out the window and going, where did my money go?
Where did this term money dysmorphia come from?
Well, I associate money dysmorphia kind of like body dysmorphia, right? I'm not really sure where it originally originated, but it's that perception of an individual's interpretation of how they look at things. You know, some folks look in the mirror and they see this beautiful skinny person, and other people look in the mirror and they're like, "Oh my goodness, where did these wrinkles come from? And who is this person standing before me?" I think that that's also how a lot of folks see money. Some of it is learned behavior from our parents, where our parents might have instilled this anxiety in us at a young age, not realizing that they were doing that around money. Maybe as a child, you heard mom and dad say, I don't have the money for this, or I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill. Or maybe you even experienced times where lights were turned off or the water was cut off, right? And so I think subconsciously, especially in our children, they pick up on things that we put out there. And so For someone like me, just to share a personal story, I actually grew up below poverty level, but never knew it. My dad, at one point in time, owned his own business when I was a child. My mom worked to pay for insurance for the family. So there were times where the family didn't have money to buy the things that we wanted, and sometimes didn't always have the money to buy things that we needed. I was also a sponsored kid. I played all of the sports I wanted to play. I was a competitive singer. I got to do all of the things I wanted to do and the things that I enjoyed. But it wasn't until I was an older teenager that I actually realized, like, hey, my parents never really taught me how to save, and they never really talked about money other than I can remember mom and dad sitting at the kitchen table, often to balance the checkbook, right? I have a 14-year-old, and if I was to say balance a checkbook, he would probably look at me like I had three eyes and be like, what is that, mom? So there are things that I wish my parents would have taught me sooner, especially around money and the importance of savings, because I feel like as an adult, there are times that I've really struggled with that in my life. Had my parents talked a little bit more about money and been a little bit more open, I feel like I would have probably been a little bit more financially successful. Again, I'm one of those folks who, as I talk about it, I'm like, oh, don't compare yourself to other people. But I find myself doing that as well. And I am a certified financial counselor. So it's really hard to retrain that brain, because I think we all at some point in time suffer from that money dysmorphia, right? And how we perceive money and the importance of it. So,
But growing up, you didn't realize your family had struggles, correct?
correct. Correct. I
So
never realized it.
So, although your parents didn't teach you about money, they also you didn't hear I'm assuming, we can't afford that, or rich people are bad, or we're never going to get ahead. You also didn't hear that though, too, which I think is a gift.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes. Now, I would say that if I heard anything, it would be like, oh, we can't afford to do that. And it was always followed up with right now.
I love that.
So I think that my parents did a good job of sheltering us from that. But at the same time, I think that I might have appreciated what I was given more had I known some of the financial struggles that my parents actually were going through.
Mm.
I think that as a child, I probably maybe wouldn't have asked for as much, but I would have definitely been more appreciative of the things that my parents did provide for me.
How old were you, and what made you realize that, oh, I I grew up below poverty level? What happened?
I can actually recall a time as a very young teenager asking, hey, can we go eat at such and such place? And not really understanding the concept of money. And my mom was like, we don't have the money for that. And I'm like, but you got a check. Like, why can't you just write a check? And mom, at that point in time, really explained to me, you can write a check all day long, but you have to have the money to support that check when it goes through the financial institution to clear. So when it hits the credit union's account, I have to have the money to pay that bill, so to speak. And it was like, oh, okay, now I have a better understanding. And so I think my parents were really good about creating that budget, right, to keep us afloat and to make sure that we did have the things that we absolutely had to have: the clothing, water, shelter, food, things of that nature, and still trying to provide the things that we wanted. My parents did really good sticking to a budget. And so I did kind of learn like the importance of planning for a family vacation, or hey, school is coming around and we know that we have school supplies that we have to buy. So it's important to set some money aside so that we're not having to put things on a credit card. I think now in today's society, because so many folks, especially our millennials and our Gen Z, are finding these little snapshots through TikTok or through Instagram or even Snapchat, just any social platform. They're seeing folks live a particular life, but maybe not understanding how they got there, right? Did these folks who are giving you an insight or a snapshot, so to speak, did they finance some of this? Did they borrow money? Are they sponsored, right? Are they in debt over their eyeballs just so that they can carry that nice handbag or go to Fiji on a vacation or take the family to Disney? Um, it's great that you see these things online to an extent, because I also think that that gives you something to maybe aspire, right? Like, I would love to take a family vacation to Fiji, or I would love to be able to take my little one to Disney, or to afford my dream car. But you're just seeing a snapshot in time and not necessarily everything behind the scenes. And it could be how hard these people have had to work to put this money aside to reach those goals. So I think that that's also really important to take into consideration, and not just think like, I'm going to put this on a credit card because I want to carry around that nice handbag, or I want to live that life that I'm seeing portrayed through social media.
With body dysmorphia, I think everyone has it to a certain extent, right? I mean, we look in the mirror, we see certain things, and if I say to someone, "Well, I see this when I look in the mirror," someone could be like, "You're crazy." And then you mentioned the with the money dysmorphia, it's there's not enough, or you are spending above your means. And it and I was having a conversation earlier about if someone is tying their self-worth to their net worth, and they're
Hmm.
constantly saying, well, if I just have this much money saved, or I have this much money invested, everything will be okay, or I'll feel a lot better. And then you get to that number and you go, oh, no, 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 I really needed a little bit more than that. No, let's creep that number up. Or then conversely, the spender that spends every dollar that they have, is it fair to say everyone has a bit of dysmorphia, money dysmorphia in them? It's just how strong it's showing up and like on where on the continuum they are.
Yes, I would totally agree with that, especially when it comes to reaching your financial goals. I think that goal line is consistently moving. As we get into recessions, or as we see our parents struggling and having to come out of retirement and go back to work because it's just too expensive to live, or they didn't save enough when they were younger and they thought, hey, I've reached the age of retirement. I think that that's also an important thing to really take into consideration. And that's one of the things I talk about during financial empowerment. Retirement is not an age number, it is truly a mathematical number. And what can you afford to live on for the rest of your life? I think people have a little distortion of that as well. They think, oh, I'm 65 or I'm 67. I've put in my time. I can retire. I should be able to live comfortably, rather than taking a step back and going, okay, is my house paid off? Will this vehicle last me through the rest of my life? Have I set enough money aside to continue to travel because maybe that's something I enjoy? um, do they take into consideration the little things that life is going to throw at you, right? You're going to have to maybe replace a tire or an air conditioner at home. You have things that, your family or your friends or grandkids are graduating from college and high school, and you've got weddings to attend. So you have to really stop and take into consideration that it's not so much a numbers game when it comes to your age. It's more of a numbers game as far as how much do I need to live, and how much do I need to live comfortably, because you don't want to be stressed out in those golden years, when you're wondering how you're going to have to pay for things, or even worrying about them and maybe considering having to go back to work, because it's really sad when folks are like, hey, I've only been able to retire for a year or two and I have to go back to work because I cannot afford, either I can't afford my lifestyle or I just can't afford to live. And then going in the other direction, those who are really big spenders and trying to keep up with the Joneses, if you will. Take a step back and look and see where your money's really being spent. I know that I have had those, what I like to call purchase regrets, where I've purchased something, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then, like 2 weeks later, I'm like, that was a really bad decision. Why did I do that to myself? One of the other stories I like to tell in my financial empowerment classes is, rather than put things on a credit card, right, where I'm going to have to pay them out over time with interest, what happens if I take the time to save for those purchases? A lot of times we see that when we go 6 months without it, while we're quote unquote saving for it, we realize we really didn't need it that bad or want it, right? So that purchase power kind of goes away a little bit and we're like, ah, I didn't really need that after all. When it comes to couples, those are conversations that really need to be had, and they need to be had openly and honestly. A lot of times we see one spouse who's really big on saving and they're like, we can't spend money for this, right? We're planning for retirement. And maybe they're to an extreme where they cannot spend money. And then you have that person who's like, oh, yeah, I can't take it with me when I go. So I'm just going to spend, spend, spend. I think that those are conversations that really need to be had early on, preferably before you get married, right? So that you kind of know where the other person's standing. When it comes to family, I'm really big on like teaching your children because my parents didn't teach me to save at a young age. That is one thing I have done with my son from a very, very early age on. He had multiple piggy banks, and I would tell him, we have to feed your pigs. And at first he looked at me like, I don't have pigs, Mom. And I'm like, yes, these are your piggy banks and we have to feed them. And we feed them money. And as you feed them, they get really fat. Of course, the piggy bank doesn't expand, but it got really heavy. And so a 2-year-old realizing that his piggy bank was extremely heavy, it was like your pig is super full, right? Landon is now 14 and he still remembers these stories of I got to feed my pigs, Mom. And he'll say, hey, Mom, put this in my savings account because I know the credit union pays me to save. Or put this in my certificate of deposit because you're going to pay me more for my CD than you will for my savings account. He knows money sitting in a checking account does him no good unless he needs to spend it. And so I think that where I felt like my parents didn't encourage savings or teach savings from a young age, I have had that dysmorphia and taken it to the extreme with my son and really explain the importance of saving and saving for the rainy day. Now, he'll spend money if he wants to make a purchase that I'm not willing to pay for. He'll stop and he'll see how much money he has in his checking account and really evaluate, is the purchase worth the money I'm going to spend and see disappear? So I think it's important to talk about it amongst your significant other, but it's also important to teach your children, right? Because in the end, we don't know what we don't know.
I would say probably also going back to your parents, they probably didn't talk about saving because that wasn't an action they were taking, right?
Correct.
I mean, it
I
was
think that,
probably money in, money out just as
yes,
fast. And
yes.
they didn't have the luxury to save. So why would they, how could they talk to you about it if they're not practicing it themselves? It's just not top of mind.
I also think that maybe it's something that their parents didn't teach them because
Right.
again, you don't know what you don't know. So how can you help break that cycle? And I think that that's why financial empowerment is so important, right? Because when you know better, you do better.
Absolutely. And you bring up a couple or partners or when you're in a relationship with someone, it's very rare that you both think the same way about money, right? It's usually one's a saver, one's a spender, or, somewhere on the continuum, but it's rather uncommon for both partners to be on the exact same page with money, but you don't know it until stuff comes up
Yeah,
and situations happen. And because we don't talk about money because we're not taught, or if we are taught, we're taught by one parent and they just pass on their stuff, whether they're savers or whatever it is. And it's very rare to see an outside perspective. Like you're not taught both sides of it. You're either taught to save or, it's never talked about and we just spend. And when you don't talk about money and you just think the way you just think you're right. You just think you're correct because we don't talk about money because it's taboo, right? So no one challenges us, no one shows us a different perspective, and we just operate as if, we're hoarding our money or we're spending every dollar that comes in, we're not saving anything or in between. And that's where it is super important to be aware of kind of your quirk, and because it's good to save, but there is a risk of saving too much, right? You're not then enjoying your life. There could be a quality of life issue. There could be just a focus on a goal that you're never achieving. And then obviously conversely, if we're spending everything and we retirement and our future selves are at a disadvantage.
right.
So I think it is important to kind of reflect on, kind of understanding we're all a little bit messed up when it comes to money, right? We all have our dysmorphia, and where do we fall, and how can we learn from others to kind of balance it out a little bit, make it a little bit more even keeled, and that I think creates a better quality of life. No one's right, no one's wrong.
Right.
Everyone has their points. It
Yes.
just is. And I think there's a huge mental change that we need to bring on in order to address it and just say, I have a thing with money. It is what it is. I can learn from it. I can adjust, but bringing the awareness, I think, is so important. In your financial empowerment classes, do you talk about money dysmorphia? Like, do you say those words?
So I've never actually used the term money dysmorphia. We do talk about people's feelings around money, feelings that might be passed down from one parent to the child, or even that social media craze where you're seeing things and it's making you feel a certain way. We do discuss that.
What's the internal shift that happens when someone goes, I'm bad with money, to I'm learning to trust myself with money? How does
Oh,
that shift the emotional math of money dysmorphia?
so I like to use the term it right sizes the ship, right? Instead of you being swung far left, you might move more center, right? It helps recenter things for folks. Um, I know here at my particular credit union, at Tarrant County's credit union, one of the things that we have just recently done, we have 6 certified financial counselors on staff. And before the end of the year, we're adding 8 more people on. And so that certified financial counseling not only like gives us tools to work with to help folks help recenter their lives if they're one extreme or the other, but it allows us to really pick up on conversational cues or things that we're seeing in folks' accounts, to where we can actually open the discussion with them and open it in a way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable or as if we're criticizing their behavior, but more along the lines of opening things to say, hey, there is a better way. Again, trying to help them not be more left or right, but more centered in their finances and help recenter that mindset of yes, it's okay to spend and to enjoy life, or maybe I have struggled with money, but now that I'm getting things back on track, I feel more relaxed. I'm not mentally stressed, because we have found that a lot of times, people worry about their health. Finances play a huge part in that. If you're consistently stressed out about money, your brain is distracted. It affects your physical well being, it affects your mental well being. You're distracted at work, which can cause other issues. And so, trying to find that perfect center sometimes is a continuous work in progress with folks. And that's why finding an advocate, such as a certified financial coach, and maybe even that third party who will tell you the truth without coming across either offensive or sugarcoating things too much. And I like to say, like patting you on the head or patting you on the back, saying it's going to be okay. Finding somebody that you trust to help walk that journey with you is extremely important. And to help take that stigma around money dysmorphia away, right? And just say that it's going to be okay, and we're going to teach you a better way so that you don't feel like you're more left or right. You're more centered and feel more aligned, right? When it comes to your finances.
And I think also what's important is for everyone to understand this is no reflection of who you are as a person.
Correct.
You're not good or bad because you like to buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. You're not good or bad because your savings account can never be big enough. Like because there's it's not your character. It's not who you are. It's just this quality that you have.
Correct.
And I think getting people to understand that, because so often we just attach all of these emotions to money and give it way more emotional power in our lives than it wants or deserves or needs or anything like that. It's so
Yes,
we need to remove the labels of I'm a spender, I'm a saver.
yes,
Those are neutral. I mean, one's not good, one's not bad. They
correct.
both have their pros and cons. And so I think that's so important for people to understand. And I think once we start to remove the good, bad, and slapping our own labels on things, I think that helps us create a more positive relationship with money.
Agreed. Totally agree.
So as we're wrapping up, what what's the emotional breakthrough that finally helps someone see their wealth accurately? Like not just the numbers, but the deep down feeling that they're going to be okay.
I think that's where people find their own joy, right? And they do realize that money doesn't define who they are. It's not their character. It doesn't make them worthy or unworthy. I think just finding that satisfaction and that joy in this is where I stand, this is what I've accomplished. Because again, that knowing better and doing better, I think is a big part um, of helping folks recenter themselves and to truly find that joy. Because in the end, I think that that's what it's all about. Um, Not stressing about how you're going to pay the bills or stressing about, man, that goal line keeps moving and I'm never going to save enough. But finding that joy and contentment where you're at and where you could see yourself going in the future.
You're a financial counselor. You've mentioned financial counseling. And I mean, that is just like jumbo shrimp. Like it's like the two, they don't go together, right? Because it's left brain, right brain. But and that's where I believe the financial services industry has been lacking for so long, is because we just looked at finances as math and robotic and not education. It's just invest here, do that, and you should know how to do this and figure it out. And dudes in suits that show how much they know and don't show you what to know. They just show you how much they know. They don't
Mhm.
teach you. And now it's just so wonderful that the industry is changing so much that a financial counselor does exist, because there is so much of the junk that we put on the money. It's almost like the math part of it, the investing part of it, the budgeting. That's the easy part.
Yeah.
It's removing all the head trash that we have. That's the hard part. And once we're able to get through that, that's where you can really make a positive change in your life.
Yes, I think that that's where credit unions and folks like a Backbone actually come in, is because we want to help you, right? It's not about a numbers game for us. It's about sharing stories that are impactful and that can make you as an individual step back and say, wow, I'm on that same path, or I know somebody who is. And having those sometimes tough conversations. I think that it's important to realize that even though we work at a financial institution, credit unions are very much a non judgmental place, right? Because we work for the people. It's not about putting money in a stockholder's pocket or a shareholder's pocket. It's about doing the right things to help individuals reach their financial goals. And everyone's goals are different. For some, it's that purchasing that first car or the first home, or for a single mom maybe putting her child through college. For some folks, it's just I want to get my credit cards paid off. I made mistakes when I was younger, and I just want to be debt free. Or I'm wanting to save for retirement and to be able to live comfortably. I think that it's really important for folks to stop and see what their financial institutions offer and to really walk alongside someone who wants to walk along with you. And I really think that that's a place where credit unions and Backbone can really assist. We want to share our stories, we want to share our best practices. We want to teach you that there can be a better way. Again, not a left side or a right side, but more of a centered place where there can be harmony, right, when it comes to how we look at money and how we can just teach you to reach the goals that you want to reach when it comes to your finances.
Everyone has some sense of dysmorphia when it comes to money, right? We have something. Everyone has a little something. We need to recognize it. And it doesn't make you good or bad that we have this. We all have something. For listeners who are like, okay, well, that's good. I now have the permission to kind of feel the way I do. So for listeners that are in this and they're kind of starting to accept it and okay, where do we start when like the logic just isn't enough? We're still kind of in the emotional part of it.
Wow. Um, I would say you have to sometimes take the emotional part out of it and see it for truly what it is. And sometimes when we can, and that's a lot of times easier said than done, but when we can remove that emotional aspect of things and look at things from what I like to call a business point of view and put a business hat on and instead of an emotional hat, sometimes that allows us to either push past those emotional feelings that we have tied, whether they be positive or negative, and really just see the picture for what it is. And that helps give clarity and allows us to move in the direction that we need to move into. My mom tells me all the time, I don't know how you do that. Like I said, Mom, I take the emotion out of things. And because our emotions sometimes really mess with our heads, right? And they put us on a path that we don't intend to go down or don't want to go down. And so if we can help remove that emotional aspect or the emotional ties that we have, especially to money, it allows us to see a picture for what it is and allows us to kind of move in the direction that we want to move into. So, and if you can't get there, find a trusted person who can help you get there, right? That would be my advice that I would give to folks. Find that trusted outside voice who would say, this is not the end all be all. We can help you push past this. And I really think that that's where finding that trusted financial source comes into play when it has anything to do with money.